Hello, and welcome to Thriving in Interdisciplinary Teams. My name is Danielle. I'm the owner of my company, Vibrant Systems, and my business is all about connection and community building. And to me, this isn't just about learning how to connect to others, but it's also about deepening that connection to ourselves so we can show up in community in ways that are reflective of our authenticity. And this isn't easy work per se. I have worked in community building for most of my career, first in nonprofits, through my degrees, my anthropology bachelor degree, and my master's of public health. And then I went into working in community climate adaptation after I graduated from my master's. And working in communities is so important because these grassroots initiatives or these connections that we have with the people who live around us, whether that's as simple as a club or if it's something different like a neighborhood or a municipality. There's so many different ways communities exist. There's so many different teams that we tend to encounter in our lives, whether it's in our workplace or on a more casual communal level. And in this webinar, I want to talk about some of the pitfalls I personally have noticed working in interdisciplinary teams, as well as the really important foundations we need to build to actually move forward in interdisciplinary teams in a way that is thriving and sustainable and transformative. So let's get started with the pitfalls. What goes wrong when we collect a bunch of diverse experts and skill sets into one team to create solutions or to simply connect and grow as a community? Because communities are already inherently diverse in the skill sets that people have and the perspectives that they have. Some might be more diverse than others, but I think the communities that I have been fortunate enough to be a part of or to work with in the past have always had one thing in common, and that's their willingness to invest in their diversity, as opposed to trying and clinging to this idea that they must be one thing. Some of the pitfalls I've noticed, though, working in interdisciplinary teams myself, is that all too often we tend to still operate in these teams from a place of hierarchy. We put certain kinds of knowledge or expertise above others. We override certain people, whether they're women or people of color or younger people, because for whatever reason, we know what the reasons are. We live in systems that actively tell us that these kinds of knowledge are less important. And this means we miss perspectives and facets of the system that are really important to actually working in transformative ways. Another common pitfall is people overcommitting. Unfortunately, I get it. I'm someone who, for a long time, I would have my fingers in lots of different little pots because that to me was important. But what I wasn't seeing when I was doing that is because I was overextending myself, because I was being dishonest about the capacity that I actually had, I actually ended up letting a lot of groups down. And I think we do really need to be honest in these spaces. Another common pitfall that I notice in community building is this habit to lead with ego first. Either we have something to prove, or we have a position to protect, or we have this perception that is really close to our perceived identity. And so contradicting that perception or perspective feels very unsafe. And if that's attached to our skill set, our expertise, our belonging to this community in some way, and then that is contradicted by, say, somebody with a different perspective or another set of skills, this then becomes part of the reason why people pull back, people become defensive. These perceived slights then can escalate into conflict that leads to these groups, teams, communities dissolving. And another thing, one more thing that I'll touch on as a common pitfall is if this community, this group, or this team is bringing in an external expert to guide them in some capacity or some way, if they are not taught, if the expert does not share their knowledge about whatever expertise they're sharing, the the community's capacity to expand, to hold that initiative, that program, or that skill set isn't there. And so when that expert eventually leaves, the community often ends up losing those skills or benefits that they got from that expert. And these are just some of the ways that I have really noticed interdisciplinary teams in varying capacities actually creating problems on a community level. And when we're talking about building blocks for building communities, we do need to be very honest about where we also need that expertise, where we need that diversity, where we need the different perspectives to see the fullness of the system that we're in. And if we want to work in these teams, in this diverse skill set, in a way that is thriving and transformative and sustainable, we need to be very aware of these pitfalls. So, how do we do that? That's exactly what I seek to answer in this episode of Building Blocks for Community Building. The first and the most solid, actually, okay. I have a couple floating around up here. Nothing's ever set super in stone as far as how I move through talking about it. But the first one that I will bring up is the very simple fact that we need to be honest and accountable to our capacities and the commitments that we're making. Naturally, there will be times when we're working in a team where, for whatever reason, something comes up and we cannot commit the way that we originally intended. But I also think it's very, very common for people to overextend themselves and just not be able to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver. And there's a few ways to deal with this. On one hand, if we're actually honest about our capacity, we can help each other carry the burdens in a different way, or at least we can shift expectations of what's possible for this group. And the other side is we can expand the team that we're in. We can look to get more help or assistance from other people in our life, in our community. And I think that is a really powerful way to decentralize our teams and our decision making and our generative power that exists in communities because as more people feel important in this community building and development, the more committed they are to seeing through these different goals that we might have. But for this to work, we also need to work in these interdisciplinary teams. And again, this team in my head, I'm seeing it's the group of the 5 champions, 7 champions who really, really care about this one initiative in their community, and they are doing everything they can to make it happen. That's the team I have up here. It might look different for you wherever you are, but to make these teams work, we need to build them relationship first. And that means seeing each other as people, as complex, moving from a place of curiosity about the skills that each person brings and being willing to learn from one another and to be kind to one another when things go wrong. Because in my experience, one of the reasons why people tend to overcommit or people please or do more than they should is because they have felt that that's how they build safety. If they're valuable to this team, then they're not going to be rejected. But if we shift towards a more relational kind of kindness, grounded curiosity, and honesty about who we are as people and what our capacity actually is, then that danger, that fear that someone might have also begins to shift. And in interdisciplinary teams, in my experience, this relational aspect is indispensable. And it's also been the part that is most commonly forgotten. And actually, this is one that I forgot in the common pitfalls, but so many things, whether it's funding deadlines or assignments or event deadlines, community goals, everything has a sense of urgency attached to it. And for truly grounded, authentic community building, we need to move from a place that is not grounded in urgency. Our timelines and our connections must exist outside of these deadlines that might be real for whatever reason, but our commitment to one another is not on that deadline. And that shift to building relationships as the starting point rather than as something that supposedly happens naturally is going to shift a lot about our team. And one of the ways I think this is really important is we need to create space to connect with one another away from the problem, outside of the context of challenge and risk and budgets and all of those sticky elements that come from working on an issue. We need to create equal spaces to celebrate, to learn about one another, to build connections that are actually heart to heart as opposed to mind, and to also make space to acknowledge and sit with potential losses or obstacles that are throwing a wrench in the plans we've made. I do a lot of work related to strategic planning from a transformational standpoint. If you're interested in that, you can go buy my Transforming Communities guidebook on my website. But in that, it really speaks to what intentions are we setting and what values are we learning from that intention. And from there, we explore the vision and the mission. And it's only when we have those four pieces defined in a way that feels resonant to a community team, whether they're leaders or builders or just the community themselves. From that place of resonance and alignment, we build the strategic plan. And that in itself is a fundamental shift away from urgency. In community building, too, we need to really remember in these interdisciplinary teams and these diverse skill sets, we need to remember that there are perspectives and expertise and skills that are not in the room. No matter how intentionally we build our team, there are going to be things we miss. And so, because of that, it is important that we also make a point to bring this relationship building beyond the walls, the room that that team meets in. Go into the community, host a meeting in a public space where people can ask questions, not as a town hall asking them to give you questions, but to create this awareness and visibility of what you're doing. Or go out as a team for a relaxing coffee break and let people chat with you, right? It's simple things like this that really shift the way that we move. in these spaces. And the other value, an incredible value to moving beyond the walls of this team space, this office that we're working in, or this work site that we're building something, is that we get to meet other community members who might have the skills to further flesh out or broaden our awareness of the system that we're operating in. Maybe that's a teacher, an artist, a storyteller, a operations manager at the town that we live in. Maybe it's another nonprofit owner or a small business who's been having issues with an element of delivery in the community. And as we do this, as we start to listen to one another and listen to the values beyond the conversations, we're going to start to see a lot more connections in how this community moves and transforms. And for our teams, when we're working on complex issues or wicked problems, that information is incredibly invaluable. And our presence in the community, that building of relationships with community members, will help build trust if we're there to try and help implement a program or a project or an initiative. And this way of working in a team and seeing your team as just a small part of the broader community that you're in is going to take work. It's not the instinct that many of us have been taught. And that's why, with my company, Vibrant Systems, I take these different perspectives and I pull them into my own spiral path that I call the Vibrant Path. And I work with people, communities, community builders who want to see this kind of transformation happen in their communities. Some of this work is in my community mentorship partnerships. We go through that process of transforming communities that I described earlier, from the intention setting to the actual strategic plan, as well as incorporating some of my facilitated workshops into the work that I do for you. I also offer just facilitated workshops, as well as contract services for communities that already know what they want, but they want someone aligned and resonant to their goals to hop in on that. I've I've really enjoyed my contract work because it tends to be so diverse for what I get to do. I will put that below. If you're someone who is also very passionate about community building, but you feel yourself begin to dissolve at the edges if you pour too much into other people, I also have resources for you because not too long ago, that was me. Before I started Vibrant Systems, I was dissolving into the relationships, whether it was work or personal or my community relationships that I was a part of. And on my shop page on my website, I sell a few products, video courses, guidebooks to help you explore not just the foundation of yourself and your core values, but also the way to move forward in a way that's truly aligned and relevant to you and your core self. So I'll put those below. If you have stuck with me this long, I want to thank you. Originally, I was recording this as a webinar. It did not work out though because the weather was not on my side and the internet was not great. So if you're finding this video now as a recording, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you've enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe so more people can find it. And if you want to stay up to date on more free webinars and events that I offer, you can head over to my newsletter link, also down below, and sign up for that. I send out one newsletter a month that just gives a strong update of what to expect ahead. So thank you for sitting with me for this time, and let's make your story a vibrant one.